Hello everyone, I'm Matthew Allen and welcome back to What a Book. Today we are continuing on in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Titan's Curse, Chapter 9. I Learn How to Grow Zombies. The thing about flying on a Pegasus during the daytime is that if you're not careful, you can cause a serious traffic accident on the Long Island Expressway. I had to keep Blackjack up in the clouds, which were, fortunately, pretty low in the winter. We darted around trying to keep the white Camp Half-Blood van in sight, and if it was cold on the ground, it was seriously cold in the air, with icy rain stinging my skin. I was wishing I'd brought some of that Camp Half-Blood orange thermal underwear they'd sold in the camp store, but after the story about Phoebe and the Centaur Blood t-shirt, I wasn't sure I trusted their products anymore. We lost the van twice, but I had a pretty good sense that they would go into Manhattan first, so it wasn't too difficult to pick up their trail again. Traffic was bad with the holidays and all. It was mid-morning before they got into the city. I landed Blackjack near the top of the Chrysler building and watched the white camp van, thinking it would pull into the bus station, but it just kept driving. "Where's Argus taking them?" I muttered. "Oh, Argus ain't driving, boss," Blackjack told me. "That girl is." "Which girl?" "The hunter girl, with the silver crown thing in her hair." "Zoe?" "That's the one. Hey, look, there's a donut shop. Can we get something to go?" I tried explaining to Blackjack that taking a flying horse to a donut shop would give every cop in there a heart attack, but he didn't seem to get it. Meanwhile, the van kept snaking its way toward the Lincoln Tunnel. It had never even occurred to me that Zoe could drive. I mean, she didn't look 16. Then again, she was immortal. I wondered if she had a New York license, and if so, what her birth date said. "Well," I said, "let's get after them." We were about to leap off the Chrysler building when Blackjack whinnied an alarm and almost threw me. Something was curling around my leg like a snake. I reached for my sword, but when I looked down, there was no snake. Vines, grapevines, had sprouted from the cracks between the stones of the building. They were wrapping around Blackjack's legs, lashing down my ankles so he couldn't move. "Going somewhere?" Mr. D asked. He was leaning against the building with his feet levitating in the air, his leopard skin warm-up suit and black hair whipping around in the wind. "God alert!" Blackjack yelled. "It's the wine dude!" Mr. D sighed in exasperation. "The next person, or horse, who calls me the wine dude will end up in a bottle of Merlot." "Mr. D!" I tried to keep my voice calm as the grapevines continued to wrap around my legs. "What do you want?" "Oh, what do I want? You thought, perhaps, that the immortal, all-powerful director of camp would not notice you leaving without permission? Well, maybe. I should throw you off this building, minus the flying horse, and see how heroic you sound on the way down." I balled my fist. I knew I should keep my mouth shut, but Mr. D was about to kill me or haul me back to camp in shame, and I couldn't stand either idea. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you?" Purple flames flickered in his eyes. "You're a hero, boy. I need no other reason." "I have to go on this quest. I've got to help my friends. That's something you wouldn't understand." Boss," Blackjack said nervously, "seeing as how we're wrapped in vines and you're 900 feet in the air, you might want to talk nice." The grapevines coiled tighter around me. Below us, the white van was getting farther and farther away. Soon it would be out of sight. "Did I ever tell you about Ariadne?" Mr. D asked. "Beautiful young princess of Crete. She liked helping her friends too. In fact, she helped a young hero named Theseus, also a son of Poseidon. She gave him a ball of magical yarn that let him find his way out of the labyrinth. And do you know how Theseus rewarded her?" The answer I wanted to give was, "I don't care," but I didn't figure that would make Mr. D finish the story any faster. "They got married," I said. "Happily ever after. The end." Mr. D sneered. "Not quite. Theseus said he would marry her. He took her aboard his ship and sailed for Athens. Halfway back on a little island called Naxos, what's the word you mortals use today? He dumped her. I found her there, alone, heartbroken, crying her eyes out. She'd given up everything, left everything she knew behind to help a dashing young hero who tossed her away like a broken sandal." "That's wrong," I said. "But that was thousands of years ago. What's that got to do with me?" Mr. D regarded me coldly. "I fell in love with Ariadne, boy. I healed her broken heart, and when she died, I made her my immortal wife on Olympus. She waits for me even now. I shall go back to her when I am done with this infernal century of punishment at your ridiculous camp. I stared at him. You're married? But I thought you got in trouble for chasing a wood nymph. My point is you heroes never change. You accuse us gods of being vain. You should look at yourselves. You take what you want, use whoever you have to, and then you betray everyone around you. So you'll excuse me if I have no love for heroes. They are a selfish, ungrateful lot. Ask Ariadne, or Medea. For that matter, ask Zoe Nightshade. What do you mean, ask Zoe? He waved his hand dismissively. Go. Follow your silly friends. The vines uncurled around my legs. I blinked in disbelief. You're letting me go? Just like that. The prophecy says at least 2 of you will die. Perhaps I'll get lucky and you'll be one of them. But mark my words, son of Poseidon. Live or die, you will prove no better than the other heroes. With that, Dionysus snapped his fingers. His image folded up like a paper display. There was a pop, and he was gone, leaving a faint scent of grapes that was quickly blown away by the wind. Too close, Blackjack said. I nodded, though I almost would have been less worried if Mr. D had hauled me back to camp. The fact that he'd let me go meant he really believed we stood a fair chance of crashing and burning on this quest. Come on, Blackjack, I said, trying to sound upbeat. I'll buy you some donuts in New Jersey. As it turned out, I didn't buy Blackjack donuts in New Jersey. Zoe drove south like a crazy person, and we were into Maryland before she finally pulled over at a rest stop. Blackjack darn near tumbled out of the sky, he was so tired. I'll be okay, boss, he panted. Just catching my breath. Stay here, I told him. I'm going to scout. Stay here, I can handle. I can do that. I put on my cap of invisibility and walked over to the convenience store. It was difficult not to sneak. I had to keep reminding myself that nobody could see me. It was hard, too, because I had remembered to get out of people's way so they wouldn't slam into me. I thought I'd go inside and warm up, maybe get a cup of hot chocolate or something. I had a little change in my pocket. I could leave it on the counter. I was wondering if the cup would turn invisible when I picked it up or if I'd have to deal with a floating hot chocolate problem, when my whole plan was ruined by Zoe, Thalia, Bianca, and Grover all coming out of the store. Grover, are you sure? Thalia was saying. Well, pretty sure. 99%. Okay, 85%. And you did this with acorns? Bianca asked, like she couldn't believe it. Grover looked offended. It's a time-honored tracking spell. I mean, I'm pretty sure I did it right. DC is about 60 miles from here, Bianca said. Nico and I... She frowned. Well, you still live there. That's strange. I'd forgotten. I dislike this, Zoe said. We should go straight west. The prophecy said west. Oh, like your tracking skills are better, Thalia growled. Zoe stepped toward her. You challenge my skills, you scullion. You know nothing of being a hunter. Oh, scullion? You're calling me a scullion. What the heck is a scullion? Whoa, you two, Grover said nervously. Come on, not again. Grover's right, Bianca said. DC is our best bet. Zoe didn't look convinced, but she nodded reluctantly. Very well. Let us keep moving. You're going to get us arrested driving, Thalia grumbled. I look closer to 16 than you do. Perhaps, Zoe snapped, but I have been driving since automobiles were invented. Let us go. As Blackjack and I continued south, following the van, I wondered whether Zoe had been kidding. I didn't know exactly when cars were invented, but I figured that was like prehistoric times, back when people watched black and white TV and hunted dinosaurs. How old was Zoe? And what had Mr. D been talking about? What bad experience had she had with heroes? As we got closer to Washington, Blackjack started slowing down and dropping altitude. He was breathing heavily. You okay? I asked him. Fine, boss. I could take on an army. You don't sound so good. And suddenly, I felt guilty, because I'd been running the Pegasus for half a day, non-stop, trying to keep up with highway traffic. Even for a flying horse, that had to be rough. Don't worry about me, boss. I'm a tough one. I figured he was right, but I also figured Blackjack would run himself into the ground before he complained, and I didn't want that. Fortunately, the van started to slow down. It crossed the Potomac River into central Washington. I started thinking about air patrols and missiles and stuff like that. I didn't know exactly how all those defenses worked, and wasn't sure if Pegasi even showed up on your typical military radar, but I didn't want to find out by getting shot out of the sky. Set me down there, I told Blackjack. That's close enough. Blackjack was so tired he didn't complain. He dropped toward the Washington Monument and set me on the grass. The van was only a few blocks away. Zoe had parked at the curb. I looked at Blackjack. I want you to go back to camp. Get some rest. Graze. I'll be fine. Blackjack cocked his head skeptically. You sure, boss? You've done enough already, I said. I'll be fine. And thanks a ton. A ton of hay, maybe? Blackjack mused. That sounds good. All right, but be careful, boss. I got a feeling they didn't come here to meet anything friendly and handsome like me. I promised to be careful. Then Blackjack took off, circling twice around the monument before disappearing into the clouds. I looked over at the white van. Everybody was getting out. Grover pointed toward one of the big buildings lining the mall. Dahlia nodded, and the four of them trudged off into the cold wind. I started to follow, but then I froze. A block away, the door of a black sedan opened. A man with gray hair and a military buzz cut got out. He was wearing dark shades and a black overcoat. Now, maybe in Washington you'd expect guys like that to be everywhere, but it dawned on me that I'd seen this same car a couple of times on the highway, going south. It had been following the van. The guy took out his mobile phone and said something into it. Then he looked around like he was making sure the coast was clear, and started walking down the mall in the direction of my friends. The worst of it was, when he turned toward me, I recognized his face. It was Dr. Thorne, the manticore from Westover Hall. Invisibility cap on, I followed Thorne from a distance. My heart was pounding. If he had survived that fall from the cliff, then Annabeth must have too. My dreams had been right. She was alive and being held prisoner. Thorne kept well back from my friends, careful not to be seen. Finally, Grover stopped in front of a big building that said National Air and Space Museum. The Smithsonian! I'd been here a million years ago with my mom, but everything had looked so much bigger then. Dahlia checked the door. It was open, but there weren't many people going in. Too cold, and school was out of session. They slipped inside. Dr. Thorne hesitated. I wasn't sure why, but he didn't go into the museum. He turned and headed across the mall. I made a split-second decision and followed him. Thorne crossed the street and climbed the steps of the Museum of Natural History. There was a big sign on the door. At first, I thought it said closed for pirate event. Then I realized pirate must be private. I followed Dr. Thorne inside, through a huge chamber full of mastodons and dinosaur skeletons. There were voices up ahead, coming from behind a set of closed doors. 2 guards stood outside. They opened the doors for Thorne, and I had to sprint to get inside before they closed them again. Inside, what I saw was so terrible I almost gasped out loud, which probably would have gotten me killed. I was in a huge round room with a balcony ringing the second level. At least a dozen mortal guards stood on the balcony, plus 2 monsters, reptilian women with double snake trunks instead of legs. I'd seen them before. Annabeth had called them Scythian Dracanae. But that wasn't the worst of it. Standing between the snake woman, I could swear he was looking straight down at me, was my old enemy Luke. He looked terrible. His skin was pale and his blonde hair looked almost gray, as if he'd aged 10 years in just a few months. The angry light in his eyes was still there, and so was the scar down the side of his face, where a dragon had once scratched him. But the scar was now ugly red, as though it had recently been reopened. Next to him, sitting down so that the shadows covered him, was another man. All I could see were his knuckles on the gilded arms of his chair, like a throne. "Well?" asked the man in the chair. His voice was just like the one I'd heard in my dream. Not as creepy as Kronos's, but deeper and stronger, like the earth itself was talking. It filled the whole room, even though he wasn't yelling. Dr. Thorne took off his shades. His 2-colored eyes, brown and blue, glittered with excitement. He made a stiff bow, then spoke in his weird French accent. "They are here, General." "I know that, fool," boomed the man. "But where?" "In the Rocket Museum." "The Air and Space Museum," Luke corrected irritably. Dr. Thorne glared at Luke. "As you say, sir." I got the feeling Thorne would just as soon impale Luke with one of his spikes as call him sir. "How many?" Luke asked. Thorne pretended not to hear. "How many?" the general demanded. "4, General," Thorne said. "The Satyr, Grover Underwood, And the girl with the spiky black hair and the, how do you say, punk clothes and the horrible shield. Thalia, Luke said. And 2 other girls, hunters. One wears a silver circlet. That one, I know, the general growled. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. Let me take them, Luke said to the general. We have more than enough patience, the general said. They'll have their hands full already. I've sent a little playmate to keep them occupied. But we cannot risk you, my boy. Yes, boy, Dr. Thorne said with a cruel smile. You are much too fragile to risk. Let me finish them off. No. The general rose from his chair, and I got my first look at him. He was tall and muscular, with light brown skin and slicked-back dark hair. He wore an expensive brown silk suit like the guys on Wall Street wear, but you'd never mistake this dude for a broker. He had a brutal face, huge shoulders, and hands that could snap a flagpole in half. His eyes were like stone. I felt as if I were looking at a living statue. He was amazing. He could even move. You have already failed me, Thorne, he said. But, General, no excuses. Thorne flinched. I'd thought Thorne was scary when I first saw him in his black uniform at the military academy, but now, standing before the general, Thorne looked like a silly wannabe soldier. The general was the real deal. He didn't need a uniform. He was a born commander. I should throw you into the pits of Tartarus for your incompetence, the general said. I send you to capture a child of the 3 elder gods, and you bring me a scrawny daughter of Athena. But you promised me revenge, Thorne protested. A command of my own. I am Lord Kronos' senior commander, the general said, and I will choose lieutenants who get me results. It was only thanks to Luke that we salvaged our plan at all. Now get out of my sight, Thorne, until I find some other menial task for you. Thorne's face turned purple with rage. I thought he was going to start frothing at the mouth or shooting spines, but he just bowed awkwardly and left the room. Now, my boy, the general turned to Luke. The first thing we must do is isolate the half-blood Thalia. The monster we seek will then come to her. The hunters will be difficult to dispose of, Luke said. Zoe Nightshade, do not speak her name. Luke swallowed. Sorry, General. The general silenced him with a wave of his hand. Let me show you, my boy, how we will bring the hunters down. He pointed to a guard on the ground level. Do you have the teeth? The guy stumbled forward with a ceramic pot. Yes, General. Plant them, he said. In the center of the room was a big circle of dirt, where I guess a dinosaur exhibit was supposed to go. I watched nervously as the guard took sharp white teeth out of the pot and pushed them into the soil. He smoothed them over while the general smiled coldly. The guard stepped back from the dirt and wiped his hands. Ready, General. Excellent. Water them, and we will let them scent their prey. The guard picked up a little tin watering can with daisies painted on it, which was kind of bizarre because what he poured out wasn't water. It was dark red liquid, and I got the feeling it wasn't Hawaiian punch. The soil began to bubble. Soon, the general said, I will show you, Luke, soldiers that will make your army from that little boat look insignificant. Luke clenched his fist. I've spent a year training my forces. When the Princess Andromeda arrives at the mountain, they'll be the best. Ha! The general said. I don't deny your troops will make a fine honor guard for Lord Kronos, and you, of course, will have a role to play. I thought Luke turned paler when the general said that. But under my leadership, the forces of Lord Kronos will increase 100-fold. We will be unstoppable. Behold, my ultimate killing machines. The soil erupted. I stepped back nervously. In each spot where a tooth had been planted, a creature was struggling out of the dirt. The first of them said, Meow. It was a kitten, a little orange tabby with stripes like a tiger. Then another appeared, until there were a dozen rolling around and playing in the dirt. Everyone stared at them in disbelief. The general roared, What is this, cute, cuddly kittens? Where did you find those teeth? The guard who'd brought the teeth cowered in fear. From the exhibit, sir. Just like you said, the saber-toothed tiger. No, you idiot. I said the Tyrannosaurus. Gather up those infernal fuzzy little beasts and take them outside. And never let me see your face again. The terrified guard dropped his watering can. He gathered up the kittens and scampered out of the room. You, the general pointed to another guard, get me the right teeth. Now. The new guard ran off to carry out his orders. Imbeciles, muttered the general. This is why I don't use mortals, Luke said. They are unreliable. They are weak-minded, easily bought, and violent, the general said. I love them. A minute later, the guard hustled into the room with his hands full of large, pointy teeth. Excellent, the general said. He climbed onto the balcony railing and jumped down 20 feet. Where he landed, the marble floor cracked under his leather shoes. He stood, wincing, and rubbed his shoulders. Curse my stiff neck. Another hot pad, sir? The guard asked. More Tylenol? No, it will pass. The general brushed off his silk suit, then snatched up the teeth. I shall do this myself. He held up one of the teeth and smiled. Dinosaur teeth. Those foolish mortals don't even know when they have dragon teeth in their possession. And not just any dragon teeth. These come from the ancient Sybaris herself. They shall do nicely. He planted them in the dirt, 12 in all. Then he scooped up the watering can. He sprinkled the soil with red liquid, tossed the can away, and held his arms out wide. Rise. The dirt trembled. A single skeletal hand shot out of the ground, grasping at the air. The general looked up at the balcony. Quickly, do you have the scent? Yes, Lord, one of the snake ladies said. She took out a sash of silvery fabric, like the kind the hunters wore. Excellent, the general said. Once my warriors catch its scent, they will pursue its owner relentlessly. Nothing can stop them, no weapons known to half-blood or hunter. It will tear the hunters and their allies to shreds. Toss it here. As he said that, skeletons erupted from the ground. There were 12 of them, one for each tooth the general had planted. They were nothing like Halloween skeletons, or the kind you might see in cheesy movies. These were growing flesh as I watched, turning into men, but men with dull gray skin, yellow eyes, and modern clothes. Gray muscle shirts, camo pants, and combat boots. If you didn't look too closely, you could almost believe they were human, but their flesh was transparent and their bones shimmered underneath like X-ray images. One of them looked straight at me, regarding me coldly, and I knew that no cap of invisibility would fool it. The snake lady released the scarf and it fluttered down toward the general's hand. As soon as he gave it to the warriors, they would hunt Zoe and the others until they were extinct. I didn't have time to think. I ran and jumped with all my might, plowing into the warriors and snatching the scarf out of the air. What's this? Bellowed the general. I landed at the feet of a skeleton warrior who hissed. An intruder, the general growled. One cloaked in darkness. Seal the doors. It's Percy Jackson, Luke yelled. It has to be. I sprinted for the exit, but heard a ripping sound and realized the skeleton warrior had taken a chunk out of my sleeve. When I glanced back, he was holding the fabric up to his nose, sniffing the scent, handing it around to his friends. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I squeezed through the door just as the guard slammed it shut behind me. And then I ran. Chapter 10. I break a few rocket ships. I tore across the mall, not daring to look behind me. I burst into the Air and Space Museum and took off my invisibility cap once I was through the admissions area. The main part of the museum was one huge room with rockets and airplanes hanging from the ceiling. 3 levels of balconies curled around, so you could look at the exhibits from all different heights. The place wasn't crowded, just a few families and a couple of tour groups of kids, probably doing one of those holiday school trips. I wanted to yell at them all to leave, but I figured that would only get me arrested. I had to find Thalia and Grover and the hunters. Any minute, the skeleton dudes were going to invade the museum, and I didn't think they would settle for an audio tour. I ran into Thalia. Literally. I was barreling up the ramp to the top floor balcony and slammed into her, knocking her into an Apollo space capsule. Grover yelped in surprise. Before I could regain my balance, Zoe and Bianca had arrows notched, aimed at my chest. Their bows had just appeared out of nowhere. When Zoe realized who I was, she didn't seem anxious to lower her bow. You! How dare you show thy face here? Percy? Grover said. Thank goodness. Zoe glared at him, and he blushed. Gosh, you're not supposed to be here. Luke, I said, trying to catch my breath. He's here. The anger in Thalia's eyes immediately melted. She put her hand on her silver bracelet. Where? I told them about the Natural History Museum, Dr. Thorne, Luke, and the General. The General is here? Zoe looked stunned. That is impossible. You lie. Why would I lie? Look, there's no time. Skeleton warriors... What? Thalia demanded. How many? 12, I said. And that's not all. That guy, the general, he said he was sending something, a playmate, to distract you over here. A monster. Thalia and Grover exchanged looks. We were following Artemis's trail, Grover said. I was pretty sure it led here. Some powerful monster sent... She must have stopped here looking for the mystery monster. But we haven't found anything yet. Zoe, Bianca said nervously. If it is the general... It cannot be, Zoe snapped. Percy must have seen an iris message or some other illusion. Illusions don't crack marble floors, I told her. Zoe took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I didn't know why she was taking it so personally, or how she knew the general guy, but I figured now wasn't the time to ask. If Percy is telling the truth about the skeleton warriors, she said, we have no time to argue. They are the worst, the most horrible. We must leave now. Good idea, I said. I was not including the boy, Zoe said. You are not part of this quest. Hey, I'm trying to save your lives. You shouldn't have come, Percy, Thalia said grimly. But you're here now. Come on. Let's get back to the van. That is not thy decision, Zoe snapped. Thalia scowled at her. You're not the boss here, Zoe. I don't care how old you are. You're still a conceited little brat. You never had any wisdom when it came to boys, Zoe growled. You could never leave them behind. Thalia looked like she was about to hit Zoe. Then everyone froze. I heard a growl so loud I thought one of the rocket engines was starting up. Below us, a few adults screamed. A little kid's voice screeched with delight. Kitty! Something enormous bounded up the ramp. It was the size of a pickup truck with silver claws and golden glittering fur. I'd seen this monster once before. 2 years ago, I'd glimpsed it briefly from a train. Now, up close and personal, it looked even bigger. The Nemean lion, Thalia said. Don't move. The lion roared so loud it parted my hair. Its fangs gleamed like stainless steel. Separate on my mark, Zoe said. Try to keep it distracted. Until when? Grover asked. Until I think of a way to kill it. Go! I uncapped Riptide and rolled to the left. Arrows whistled past me, and Grover played a sharp tweet-tweet cadence on his reed pipes. I turned and saw Zoe and Bianca climbing the Apollo capsule. They were firing arrows, one after another, all shattering harmlessly against the lion's metallic fur. The lion swiped the capsule and tipped it on its side, spilling the hunters off the back. Grover played a frantic, horrible tune, and the lion turned toward him. But Thalia stepped into its path, holding up Aegis, and the lion recoiled. Roar! Hiya, Thalia said. Back! The lion growled and clawed the air, but it retreated as if the shield were a blazing fire. For a second, I thought Thalia had it under control. Then I saw the lion crouching, its leg muscles tensing. I'd seen enough cat fights in the alleys around my apartment in New York. I knew the lion was going to pounce. Hey! I yelled. I don't know what I was thinking, but I charged the beast. I just wanted to get it away from my friends. I slashed with Riptide, a good strike to the flank that should have cut the monster into meow mix, but the blade just clanged against its fur in a burst of sparks. The lion raked me with its claws, ripping off a chunk of my coat. I backed against the railing. It sprang at me, 1,000 pounds of monster, and I had no choice but to turn and jump. I landed on the wing of an old-fashioned silver airplane, which pitched and almost spilled me to the floor 3 stories below. An arrow whizzed past my head. The lion jumped onto the aircraft, and the cords holding the plane began to groan. The lion swiped at me, and I dropped onto the next exhibit, a weird-looking spacecraft with blades like a helicopter. I looked up and saw the lion roar. Inside its maw, a pink tongue and throat. Its mouth, I thought. Its fur was completely invulnerable, but if I could strike it in the mouth... The only problem was the monster moved too quickly. Between its claws and fangs, I couldn't get close without getting sliced to pieces. Zoe, I shouted. Target the mouth. The monster lunged. An arrow zipped past it, missing completely, and I dropped from the spaceship onto the top of a floor exhibit. A huge model of the Earth. I slid down Russia and dropped off the equator. The Nemean lion growled and steadied itself on the spacecraft, but its weight was too much. One of the cords snapped. As the display swung down like a pendulum, the lion leaped off onto the model Earth's North Pole. Grover, I yelled, clear the area. Groups of kids were running around screaming. Grover tried to corral them away from the monster just as the other cord on the spaceship snapped and the exhibit crashed to the floor. Thalia dropped off the second floor railing and landed across from me on the other side of the globe. The lion regarded us both, trying to decide which of us to kill first. Zoe and Bianca were above us, bows ready, but they kept having to move around to get a good angle. "No clear shot," Zoe yelled. "Get it to open its mouth more." The lion snarled from the top of the globe. I looked around. Options. I needed the gift shop. I had a vague memory from my trip there as a little kid. Something I'd made my mom buy me, and I'd regretted it. If they still sold that stuff. "Thalia," I said, "keep it occupied." She nodded grimly. Yeah. She pointed her spear and a spidery arc of blue electricity shot out, zapping the lion in the tail. Roar! The lion turned and pounced. Dahlia rolled out of its way, holding up Aegis to keep the monster at bay, and I ran for the gift shop. "This is no time for souvenirs, boy," Zoe yelled. I dashed into the shop, knocking over rows of t-shirts, jumping over tables full of glow-in-the-dark planets and space ooze. The sales lady didn't protest. She was too busy cowering behind her cash register. There, on the far wall, glittery silver packets, whole racks of them. I scooped up every kind I could find and ran out of the shop with an armful. Zoe and Bianca were still showering arrows on the monster, but it was no good. The lion seemed to know better than to open its mouth too much. It snapped at Thalia, slashing with its claws. It even kept its eyes narrowed to tiny slits. Thalia jabbed at the monster and backed up. The lion pressed her. "Percy," she called, "whatever you're going to do." The lion roared and swatted her like a cat toy, sending her flying into the side of a Titan rocket. Her head hit the metal and she slid to the floor. "Hey!" I yelled at the lion. I was too far away to strike, so I took a risk. I hurled Riptide like a throwing knife. It bounced off the lion's side, but that was enough to get the monster's attention. It turned toward me and snarled. There was only one way to get close enough. I charged, and as the lion leaped to intercept me, I chunked a space food pouch into its maw. A chunk of cellophane-wrapped, freeze-dried strawberry parfait. The lion's eyes got wide, and it gagged like a cat with a hairball. I couldn't blame it. I remembered feeling the same way when I tried to eat space food as a kid. The stuff was just plain nasty. "Zoe, get ready!" I yelled. Behind me, I could hear people screaming. Grover was playing another horrible song in his pipes. I scrambled away from the lion. It managed to choke down the space food packet and looked at me with pure hate. "Snack time," I yelled. He made the mistake of roaring at me, and I got an ice cream sandwich in his throat. Fortunately, I had always been a pretty good pitcher, even though baseball wasn't my game. Before the lion could stop gagging, I shot in 2 more flavors of ice cream and a freeze-dried spaghetti dinner. The lion's eyes bugged. It opened its mouth wide and teared up on its back paws, trying to get away from me. "Now!" I yelled. Immediately, arrows pierced the lion's maw. 2, 4, 6. The lion thrashed wildly, turned, and fell backward. And then it was still. Alarms wailed throughout the museum. People were flocking to the exits. Security guards were running around in a panic with no idea what was going on. Grover knelt at Thalia's side and helped her up. She seemed okay, just a little dazed. Zoe and Bianca dropped from the balcony and landed next to me. Zoe eyed me cautiously. "That was an interesting strategy." "Hey, it worked." She didn't argue. The lion seemed to be melting, the way dead monsters do sometimes, until there was nothing left but its glittering fur coat, and even that seemed to be shrinking to the size of a normal lion's pelt. "Take it," Zoe told me. I stared at her. "What, the lion's fur? Isn't that, like, an animal rights violation or something?" "It is a spoil of war," she told me. "It is rightly thine." "You killed it," I said. She shook her head, almost smiling. "I think thy ice cream sandwich did that. Fair is fair, Percy Jackson. Take the fur." I lifted it up. It was surprisingly light. The fur was smooth and soft. It didn't feel at all like something that could stop a blade. As I watched, the pelt shifted and changed into a coat, a full-length golden brown duster. "Not exactly my style," I murmured. "We have to get out of here," Grover said. "The security guards won't stay confused for long." I noticed for the first time how strange it was that the guards hadn't rushed forward to arrest us. They were scrambling in all directions except ours, like they were madly searching for something. A few were running into the walls or each other. "You did that?" I asked Grover. He nodded, looking a little embarrassed. "A minor confusion song. I played some Barry Manilow. It works every time, but it'll only last a few seconds." "The security guards are not our biggest worry," Zoe said. "Look." Through the glass walls of the museum, I could see a group of men walking across the lawn, gray men in gray camouflage outfits. They were too far away for us to see their eyes, but I could feel their gaze aimed straight at me. "Go," I said. "They'll be hunting me. I'll distract them. No, Zoe said. We go together. I stared at her. But you said you are part of this quest now, Zoe said grudgingly. I do not like it, but there is no changing fate. You are the 5th quest member, and we are not leaving anyone behind. Chapter 11. Grover gets a Lamborghini. We were crossing the Potomac when we spotted the helicopter. It was a sleek, black military model just like the one we'd seen at Westover Hall, and it was coming straight toward us. They know the van, I said. We have to ditch it. Zoe swerved into the fast lane. The helicopter was gaining. Maybe the military will shoot it down, Grover said hopefully. The military probably thinks it's one of theirs, I said. How can the general use mortals anyway? Mercenaries, Zoe said bitterly. It is distasteful, but many mortals will fight for any cause as long as they are paid. But don't these mortals see who they're working for? I said. Don't they notice all the monsters around them? Zoe shook her head. I do not know how much they see through the mist. I doubt it would matter to them if they knew the truth. Sometimes mortals can be more horrible than monsters. The helicopter kept coming, making a lot better time than we were through DC traffic. Thalia closed her eyes and prayed hard. Hey, Dad, a lightning bolt would be nice about now, please? But the sky stayed gray and snowy. No sign of a helpful thunderstorm. There, Bianca said, that parking lot. We'll be trapped, Zoe said. Trust me, Bianca said. Zoe shot across 2 lanes of traffic and into a mall parking lot on the south bank of the river. We left the van and followed Bianca down some steps. Subway entrance, Bianca said. Let's go south, Alexandria. Anything, Thalia agreed. We bought tickets and got through the turnstiles, looking behind us for any signs of pursuit. A few minutes later, we were safely aboard a southbound train, riding away from D.C. As our train came above ground, we could see the helicopter circling the parking lot, but it didn't come after us. Grover let out a sigh. Nice job, Bianca, thinking of the subway. Bianca looked pleased. Yeah, well, I saw that station when Nico and I came through last summer. I remember being really surprised to see it because it wasn't here when we used to live in D.C. Grover frowned. New, but that station looked really old. I guess, Bianca said, but trust me, when we lived here as little kids, there was no subway. Thalia sat forward. Wait a minute. No subway at all? Bianca nodded. Now, I know nothing about DC, but I didn't see how their whole subway system could be less than 12 years old. I guess everyone else was thinking the same thing because they looked pretty confused. Bianca, Zoe said, how long ago? Her voice faltered. The sound of the helicopter was getting louder again. We need to change trains, I said. Next station. Over the next half hour, all we thought about was getting away safely. We changed trains twice. I had no idea where we were going, but after a while we lost the helicopter. Unfortunately, when we finally got off the train, we found ourselves at the end of the line, in an industrial area with nothing but warehouses and railroad tracks. And snow. Lots of snow. It seemed much colder here. I was glad for my new lion's fur coat. We wandered through the railway yard, thinking there might be another passenger train somewhere, but there were just rows and rows of freight cars, most of which were covered in snow like they hadn't moved in years. A homeless guy was standing at a trash can fire. We must have looked pretty pathetic because he gave us a toothless grin and said, Y'all need to get warmed up? Come on over. We huddled around his fire. Thalia's teeth were chattering. She said, Well, this is great. My hooves are frozen, Grover complained. Feet, I corrected for the sake of the homeless guy. Maybe we should contact camp, Bianca said. Chiron, no, Zoe said. They cannot help us anymore. We must finish this quest ourselves. I gazed miserably around the rail yard. Somewhere, far to the west, Annabeth was in danger. Artemis was in chains. A doomsday monster was on the loose, and we were stuck on the outskirts of D.C., sharing a homeless person's fire. You know, the homeless man said, you're never completely without friends. His face was grimy and his beard tangled, but his expression seemed kind. You kids need a train going west? Yes, sir, I said. You know of any? He pointed one greasy hand. Suddenly, I noticed a freight train, gleaming and free of snow. It was one of those automobile carrier trains with steel-meshed curtains and a triple deck of cars inside. The side of the freight train said Sun West Line. That's convenient, Thalia said. Thanks, She turned to the homeless guy, but he was gone. The trash can in front of us was cold and empty, as if he'd taken the flames with him. An hour later, we were rumbling west. There was no problem about who would drive now, because we all got our own luxury car. Zoe and Bianca were crashed out in a Lexus on the top deck. Grover was playing race car driver behind the wheel of a Lamborghini. And Thalia had hot-wired the radio in a black Mercedes SLK so she could pick up the alt-rock stations from DC. Join you? I asked her. She shrugged, so I climbed into the shotgun seat. The radio was playing the White Stripes. I knew the song because it was one of the only CDs I owned that my mom liked. She said it reminded her of Led Zeppelin. Thinking about my mom made me sad because it didn't seem like I'd be home for Christmas. I might not live that long. Nice coat, Thalia told me. I pulled the brown duster around me, thankful for the warmth. Yeah, but the Neiman lion wasn't the monster we're looking for. Not even close. We've got a long way to go. Whatever this mystery monster is, the general said it would come for you. They wanted to isolate you from the group, so the monster will appear and battle you one-on-one. He said that? Well, something like that, yeah. That's great. I love being used as bait. No idea what the monster might be? She shook her head morosely. But you know where we're going, don't you? San Francisco. That's where Artemis was heading. I remembered something Annabeth had said at the dance. How her dad was moving to San Francisco, and there was no way she could go. Half-Bloods couldn't live there. Why? I asked. What's so bad about San Francisco? The mist is really thick there because the Mountain of Despair is so near. Titan magic, what's left of it, still lingers. Monsters are attracted to that area like you wouldn't believe. What's the Mountain of Despair? Thalia raised an eyebrow. You really don't know? Ask stupid Zoe. She's the expert. She glared out the windshield. I wanted to ask her what she was talking about, but I also didn't want to sound like an idiot. I hated feeling like Thalia knew more than I did, so I kept my mouth shut. The afternoon sun shone through the steel mesh side of the freight car, casting a shadow across Thalia's face. I thought about how different she was from Zoe. Zoe all formal and aloof like a princess, Thalia with her ratty clothes and her rebel attitude. But there was something similar about them, too. The same kind of toughness. Right now, sitting in the shadows with a gloomy expression, Thalia looked a lot like one of the hunters. Then suddenly, it hit me. That's why you don't get along with Zoe, Thalia frowned. What? The hunters tried to recruit you, I guessed. Her eyes got dangerously bright. I thought she was going to zap me out of the Mercedes, but she just sighed. I almost joined them, she admitted. Luke, Annabeth and I ran into them once, and Zoe tried to convince me. She almost did, but... Thalia's fingers gripped the wheel. I would have had to leave Luke. Oh. Zoe and I got into a fight. She told me I was being stupid. She said I'd regret my choice. She said Luke would let me down someday. I watched the sun through the metal curtain. We seemed to be traveling faster each second, shadows flickering like an old movie projector. That's harsh, I said. Hard to admit Zoe was right. She wasn't right. Luke never let me down, never. We'll have to fight him, I said. There's no way around it. Thalia didn't answer. You haven't seen him lately, I warned. I know it's hard to believe, but I'll do what I have to. Even if that means killing him. Do me a favor, she said. Get out of my car. I felt so bad for her I didn't argue. As I was about to leave, she said, Percy? When I looked back, her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or sadness. Annabeth wanted to join the hunters too. Maybe you should think about why. Before I could respond, she raised the power windows and shut me out. I sat in the driver's seat of Grover's Lamborghini. Grover was asleep in the back. He'd finally given up trying to impress Zoe and Bianca with his pipe music after he played Poison Ivy and caused that very stuff to sprout from their Lexus's air conditioner. As I watched the sun go down, I thought of Annabeth. I was afraid to go to sleep. I was worried what I might dream. Oh, don't be afraid of dreams, a voice said right next to me. I looked over. Somehow, I wasn't surprised to find the homeless guy from the trail yard sitting in the shotgun seat. His jeans were so worn out they were almost white. His coat was ripped with stuffing coming out. He looked kind of like a teddy bear that had been run over by a truck. "If it weren't for dreams," he said, "I wouldn't know half the things I know about the future. They're better than Olympus tabloids." He cleared his throat, then held up his hands dramatically. "Dreams like a podcast, downloading truth in my ears. They tell me cool stuff." Apollo, I guessed, because I figured nobody else could make a haiku that bad. He put his fingers to his lips. "I'm incognito. Call me Fred." A god named Fred? "Oh, well, Zeus insists on certain rules. Hands off when there's a human quest, even when something really major is wrong. But nobody messes with my baby sister. Nobody." "Can you help us then?" "Shh. I already have. Haven't you been looking outside?" "The train. How fast are we moving?" Apollo chuckled. "Fast enough. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. It's almost sunset, but I imagine we'll get you across a good chunk of America, at least." "But where is Artemis?" His face darkened. "I know a lot, and I see a lot. But even I don't know that. She's clouded from me. I don't like it." "And Annabeth?" He frowned. "Oh, you mean that girl you lost?" "I don't know." I tried not to feel mad. I knew the gods had a hard time taking mortals seriously, even half-bloods. We lived such short lives compared to the gods. "What about the monster Artemis was seeking?" I asked. "Do you know what that is?" "No," Apollo said, "but there is one who might. If you haven't yet found the monster when you reach San Francisco, seek out Nereus, the old man of the sea. He has a long memory and a sharp eye. He has the gift of knowledge sometimes kept obscure from my oracle." "But it's your oracle," I protested. "Can't you tell us what the prophecy means?" Apollo sighed. "You might as well ask an artist to explain his art, or ask a poet to explain his poem. It defeats the purpose. The meaning is only clear through the search." "In other words, you don't know." Apollo checked his watch. Look at the time. I have to run. I doubt I can risk helping you again, Percy, but remember what I said. Get some sleep, and when you return, I expect a good haiku about your journey." I wanted to protest that I wasn't tired and I'd never made a haiku in my life, but Apollo snapped his fingers, and the next thing I knew, I was closing my eyes. In my dream, I was somebody else. I was wearing an old-fashioned Greek tunic, which was a little too breezy downstairs, and laced leather sandals. The Nemean lion skin was wrapped around my back like a cape, and I was running somewhere, being pulled along by a girl who was tightly gripping my hand. "Hurry," she said. It was too dark to see her face clearly, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "He will find us." It was nighttime. A million stars blazed above. We were running through tall grass, and the scent of 1,000 different flowers made the air intoxicating. It was a beautiful garden, and yet the girl was leading me through it as if we were about to die. "I'm not afraid," I tried to tell her. "You should be," she said, pulling me along. She had long dark hair braided down her back. Her silk robes glowed faintly in the starlight. We raced up the side of the hill. She pulled me behind a thorn bush and we collapsed, both breathing heavily. I didn't know why the girl was scared. The garden seemed so peaceful, and I felt strong. Stronger than I'd ever felt before. "There is no need to run," I told her. My voice sounded deeper, much more confident. "I've bested 1,000 monsters with my bare hands." "Not this one," the girl said. "Layton is too strong. You must go around, up the mountain to my father. It is the only way." The hurt in her voice surprised me. She was really concerned, almost like she cared about me. "I don't trust your father," I said. "You should not," the girl agreed. "You'll have to trick him, but you cannot take the prize directly. You will die." I chuckled. "Then why don't you help me, pretty one?" I am afraid. Layton will stop me. My sisters, if they found out, they would disown me." "Then there's nothing for it." I stood up, rubbing my hands together. "Wait," the girl said. She seemed to be agonizing over a decision. Then, her fingers trembling, she reached up and plucked a long white brooch from her hair. If you must fight, take this. My mother Pleon gave it to me. She was a daughter of the ocean, and the ocean's power is within it. My immortal power. The girl breathed on the pin, and it glowed faintly. It gleamed in the starlight like polished abalone. Take it, she told me, and make of it a weapon. I laughed. A hairpin. How will this slay lay dawn, pretty one? It may not, she admitted, but it is all I can offer if you insist on being stubborn. The girl's voice softened my heart. I reached down and took the hairpin, and as I did, it grew longer and heavier in my hand, until I held a familiar bronze sword. Well balanced, I said, though I usually prefer to use my bare hands. What shall I name this blade? Anaklusmos, the girl said sadly. The current that takes one by surprise. And before you know it, you've been swept out to sea. Before I could thank her, there was a trampling sound in the grass, a hiss like air escaping a tire, and the girl said, Too late. He is here. I sat bolt upright in the Lamborghini's driver's seat. Corver was shaking my arm. Percy, he said, it's morning. The train's stopped. Come on. I tried to shake off the drowsiness. Thalia, Zoe, and Bianca had already rolled up the metal curtains. Outside were snowy mountains dotted with pine trees, the sun rising red between two peaks. I fished my pen out of my pocket and stared at it. Anaklusmos, the ancient Greek name for riptide. A different form, but I was sure it was the same blade that I had seen in my dream. And I was sure of something else, too. The girl I had seen was Zoe Nightshade. And that's where we're going to leave it off for today. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this collection of chapters in What a Book. If you liked it, make sure to reach out to me over on social media on Instagram and Twitter using the linktree link down below, as since this is marked safe for kids, you are unable to leave comments. I know, that's just the YouTube system. Doesn't fully make sense, but here we are. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to check out everything else that I do. Tune in next week for What a Thought. After Thanksgiving break, right? We're in Thanksgiving break, everyone. I hope for those that are out with family, that you guys are enjoying your time, that you're being safe, that you are having fun, all those other things that people do. Eat plenty of turkey. Don't get into too much trouble. I had another thing to say, and I forgot. Oh, if you have the free time, because you're on break, check out everything else that I do in the Linktree link. There's the other YouTube channel where I play video games every single day. And also check me out on Twitch, when I pop up on there. There's no set schedule because I am always changing things, but I will set a schedule eventually. So thank you guys so much. I've been Matthew Allen. This has been What a Book, and I'll see all of you next week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.